So, welcome to this membership meetup for zones 28 and 32. We're going to spend a little bit of time today looking at the state of the continent. Sometimes we hear about the state of the city or the state of the club. We're going to talk about the state of the continent, but with a focus on our zones as well as we look at membership in North America. And I really think it's important for us to think about this now because we've talked a lot about change in a number of our meetups, and I think people are talking about it quite a bit because we know this is a very profound statement to start with. If you change nothing, nothing will change. And we have a lot of metrics available to us. It's a little bit like the cockpit scene there in the bottom. We have a lot of things that we can look at in terms of data to help us make decisions. And I think this is the time that we really need to be focused on that and making sure that we're aware of the situation in North America and in our own zones and districts so that we can look forward. Now, I want to thank a few people who provided some information to help with this, certainly from a webinar that we recently had on membership globally. Brian King from RI and the chair of the RI membership committee, Tom Gump, were available a couple weeks ago to do a webinar. And of course, Doug Logan and Herb Klotz have done considerable research on a number of things related to membership over the last few years. And Herb continues to provide us with some excellent data compilation. And both Doug and Herb are continuing to look at how we integrate the action plan into what we do. So those folks have certainly done a lot of work in the past that I draw upon in this, and I want to acknowledge them as we go forward. Now, I always start with looking at what do we know about membership? And this is a graph that I put together of membership in Canada and the United States right from the very beginning, from 1905, way down there in the bottom left corner, when we don't really have much in the way of membership data, all the way to this past July. So the numbers on the bottom stop in this case at 2023, but the two lines are there for 2024 and 2025. And you'll see the blue lines with the numbers on the left axis are for the United States, and the red line, which tracks the same kind of shape of a graph very, very closely with the numbers on the right, are the Canadian numbers. And you will see that since the mid-90s, we have had year over year continuing declines. Every single year since that time. There's one year that I could never find data for, but every year that I have data for, you will see those declines. And if we look at the whole world, I add that in this case, we're looking at the United States on the left again with Canada and the global membership on the right. So Canada now is the little red lines at the bottom. The US are the blue lines, and the green line is global membership. And you'll see that about that same time that we started to see declines in North America, the total membership started to level out around that 1.2 million that we speak about, but it has gone down the last few years. That plateau continues to be fairly level, but with some declines as well. So I think it's interesting to just kind of be aware of this, that this is what our overall membership looks like. And the trends are not what we want them to be. So keep in mind what that blue line that you see so clearly with those bars, what that looks like. The red one tracks it very closely. So that's kind of the state of membership overall. Now, when we talk about membership, I generally say it's all about me, but in this case, me stands for member experience. And we hear about member experience or club experience being the most critical factor. And we'll look at a few aspects of that tonight that I hope you'll think about as we consider some of the data that we have for North America. So here's the thing. Membership and membership experience and club experiences that are positive don't happen by accident. And they most definitely don't come from wishful thinking that we do. I tend to see in clubs that we often say, well, this year we're going to grow by 15, or this year we're going to add 10 new members, without having a real plan for how to make that happen. And so the point that I want to make here is that making a difference, making a change requires intentional action by your team. So I think everybody on this call is clearly a membership enthusiast at some level, and hopefully is part of a team that is thinking about how to attract and engage people whose passions you will enable within your clubs, because that's really what we need to be thinking about. How do we do that? What is the action that we as a team are going to take to attract new people, to engage current people, and how do we think about enabling the passions of those people, because that's what it's going to take to keep them. So not going to happen by accident, Not going to happen by just saying this year's goal is add 10 when we know we don't have a plan to make it happen. So keep that in mind. It's also a bit of an art. We know that member experience or club experience has a few characteristics, and there's been all kinds of research about this, and we would have heard it from the global webinar and from other research that has been done through our zones, that what people are looking for, both current and future members, in their experience is, first of all, a welcoming and engaging culture. So the culture of the club is so critical. And the culture includes how we do things around here in terms of relationships and activities, our policies and procedures, everything about how we do what we do. Is it welcoming and engaging? People are looking for the feeling of belonging and feeling valued. Those are critical as part of that club experience. And of course, being Rotary, they're looking for an opportunity to make a difference. So there needs to be that sense of purpose. So when you think about what do we mean when we talk about member experience or club experience, it's those kinds of feelings that make an experience something that people want to come back for. Obviously, our word that we've used so much over the last little while, to be irresistible, to make people feel like it's something they don't want to miss. Those are the characteristics of what a member experience or a club experience needs to have. And it's a bit of an art. There's an attraction piece, there's a retention piece, and there's a part about taking some risks or maybe doing some tweaking to an existing club or going full speed ahead with a transformation. So all of those are things that we can think about as we consider how to make our club experience even better. Now, you may have seen this before as we've talked about attraction and attrition just being the opposite of retention. So it gives us numbers that we can compare a little more easily. Attraction is, of course, the percentage of people who join. So if you have a club of 50, what's the percentage of new people that join? Ideally, it's at least 14 or 15%. North America, it's about 12%. What about attrition? How many leave? Ideally, it should be less than 14 or 15%. In North America, it's about 15%. What we need to see is that for every club, the attraction number, clearly from a math perspective, is greater than attrition, preferably by 5% or more. Now, in the world last year, we brought in 150,000 new members, which sounds amazing. We lost 160,000 members, not where we want to be. So you've probably had this question asked to you before, and you may have participated in surveys about why do people join in the first place? And this is the key part of attraction. A few things. They want connections, whether they're looking for personal connections because they're new to a community or new to an area, or perhaps newly retired and not well connected personally, or professionally. They want to be connected to something and somebody in their community, and they want to do good stuff. They want to serve their local community in particular, but also many have interests, of course, in the international community. But for starters, they're probably looking at what happens locally. And then for Rotaractors in particular, they're looking for learning opportunities around leadership, and they tend to be a little more interested in some of the international possibilities. But those are the key reasons, always coming out at top of surveys about why do people join. Then we think about, well, what are they looking for in a club? What specifically? We talked a little bit earlier about the experience, but what is it that the club needs to demonstrate in order for them to want to be part of it? The focus or the cause is much more important than it was in the past, where we could be focused on all sorts of different areas and a little bit of all things to all people. We're seeing now that people are more interested in seeing the specifics in terms of the focus and causes that the club supports. They want to do stuff. They're not just coming to sit around or write checks in general. They want to be doing things. It needs to be affordable. So that's dues and all the other things together of what is expected of people to spend. And people are generally looking for diversity in age in particular, according to the research, but also other lenses. And other lenses, of course, are gender and background and education and profession and country of origin and all the other things that make for an interesting and diverse group of people, where those coming in, those that we want to attract, feel belonging. So that's the why and the what. Okay, we've got them. How are we going to keep them? How do we engage them to stay? So this is the attrition and retention focus. And it's very important that we all think about this, although you cannot retain yourself to growth. Retention is important to keep your numbers, but you still have to focus on attraction because growth will not happen. You can maintain, but you'll never keep the same number because there will always be people who are leaving and attrition is going to happen. So what is it that we have to think about? It's just the opposite in some ways, the meaningful experience, doing stuff. I think I said that one before, affordable, diversity. Confident leadership is important. And we saw that from the research that we've done over the last couple of years, how important leadership was. And in this case, it was specifically noted as being confident leadership. The valued and belonging, had that before, and then enjoyable, or we talk about it being fun as being critical. So what do you do to keep people? That's what you do. There's no magic bullet, there's no recipe, but we know these are the characteristics that clubs need to think about when they're concerned about retention, and everybody should be concerned about retention. Then the T was the taking risks. And in this case, we're talking about new clubs. We have lots of support for people that are looking to start new clubs, whether it's satellites or a brand new traditional kind of club, whatever it is, starting new clubs is a fantastic thing to be considering this year. And we have lots of support available, as I said. Alternative options for existing clubs, whether it's looking at timing or location. We see a bit of a trend in the research for supporting 2 meetings a month as opposed to 4, but it depends on your group and your audience. And then, of course, with existing clubs, they may need a few little tweaks or they may need considerable transformation. Either way, these are risky things to do from the standpoint that it takes courage, it takes leadership, but they are critical for us to think about. Okay. Otherwise, we don't do all those things, they're going to leave. And you've probably seen this before. The top reasons that people leave, number 1 is the club experience, the member experience, the culture, what's going on in the club, what's not going on in the club. Is there bullying? Is there inappropriate humor? All the things that can happen to make the experience less than positive, and people will choose to leave. That's the number 1 reason. Second one is unmet expectations. And that could involve a lot of things, about having looked at a website and thought that there were lots of people doing lots of fun things and then joined and found out not so much, or other unmet expectations because perhaps they didn't know what they were getting into. And the time and the costs were not what they were expecting. Perhaps they didn't know about them. They didn't have that information in advance. And then, of course, personal circumstances. And those are all the things related to changes in family and work, moving, dying. Lots of different things can happen that cause people to leave. But those are the top ones that we see for attrition. Data tells us a little bit too that age distribution is kind of important, and I wanted to share this with you in terms of data and what do we know about membership. So in Great Britain and Ireland, average age of Rotary, 71. North America and the Caribbean, 62. And in areas where we see a lot of growth, India, Korea, Philippines, 51. So it's quite different. Rotary looks different in different parts of the world. And certainly that average age data I find quite interesting as we think about and look at areas of the world where we see growth versus areas of the world where we see a lot of struggling happening in terms of keeping our folks involved. So that's just an interesting little data point. But here's a little more data for you now as we look at the zones in North America. So last year, every single zone in North America went down. Membership numbers were down last year. Now the percentages range from 1.7 to 3.6. And while I'm not excited about saying, gee, this is good that zone 28 was the zone that lost only 1.7. That was the top zone in North America, but nothing that I'm jumping up and down about to say that, gee, isn't that great that we were the best of the worst in terms of losing people, but we were 1.7%. On average, however, we have 15% of North American districts, and there are 155 districts in North America, and 15% of them grew. So it's not everywhere, it's not every club, it's not every district by any means. We had 4 districts in Zone 28 and 1 district in Zone 32 that grew last year. And in fact, we have a couple of what I'll call rock stars in each zone that have grown continuously over the last 3 years. which I think is really quite remarkable. And we're going to be looking more at these districts, so the folks that are on from them can know that we're going to be asking more questions about what's going on in these districts and having folks present to us and talk to us at one of these meetups coming up to see what's going on in 6360 Michigan and 7980 in Southern Connecticut, that those districts have grown 3 years in a row. Pretty awesome. So kudos to you. But that just gives you a little sense of the zones across North America. Now, I don't expect you to be able to see everything on this slide, but those are all our zones in North America. And the teeny tiny writing is where they are, because I can't remember where each of these zones is. So I need a little cheat sheet to tell me where they are, with a little bit of information about their starting numbers, their net change, and the percentage change. So you can see that 1.7 for zone 28, all the way up to over 3% for 25B, the total number of districts in each of those zones, the number of growing districts, and you'll see that there are 3 zones that have 4 growing districts, and one zone 33 has 5 growing districts, and the percentage that is as well. So zone 33 has the largest number of growing districts. So they're pretty close to us. We were 1.7%, they were 1.8% down. But all doing some good things that we'll certainly be looking to find out more about. And these slides will be available to you, so you'll be able to see the data for each one of these, and you'll see that again, 15% of our districts are growing. So I think that's a pretty positive thing to think about. It is possible. So let's look a little bit more now at our zones, 28 and 32. In zone 28, we were down 509. So I have to say, well, that's, good. It could have been worse for sure, but we'd like it to see better with those 4 districts that gained. And so I mentioned one of them already that had gained 3 years in a row, but there are the 4 that have gained from 4 members in 70-80 all the way up to 115 members in 55-50. We also had 10 new clubs and 3 new satellites start last year. So that's a positive thing as well. And we tend to see that in the districts that have growth, they are starting new clubs. In zone 32, down 816 with 1 district gaining members. I mentioned that one, 7980 was up 12. They had 5 new clubs and 4 new satellites. But a really positive thing, I think, is around Rotaract, that in zone 28, we added 114 members in Rotaract with 10 new clubs, 5 at the community and 5 at the university environment. And similarly, in 32, we were up 109 with 9 new clubs, 5 community and 4 university. So that's a really positive thing that we hope we'll see continue for this year, and hope that folks on the call are thinking about how to grow Rotaract. And remember that we have folks at the zone level for both the zones who are available to help you. There are people to help you with all of these things. So let's look a little bit more at our zones. This is the success track for zone 28. You may have seen these graphs before. We'll be sending them out from time to time, with great thanks to Herb Klotz, who helps compile this kind of graph for us. He takes these data and puts them in some really easy to understand ways, where we see what was considered a success track for last year, which is the green one. And that's the track that our typical pattern would need to be to give us a 0.5% growth. Now, that's not a great goal, really, 0.5%, but that's what this is showing us. What would it take to get there? And then the blue line is the actual 2024-25 performance, and the orange line is 3-year average. So you can see we're a little better than our 3-year average, but we went below the line. We didn't make the success track for last year, hence we had that decline. But the data and the algorithms that are used to put these together certainly show that the pattern continues. We see the declines when dues come around in January, and certainly the big loss that we have in June to take us to those numbers for the 1st of July. Now, interestingly, we noticed that the districts that did grow did not have those big declines in June that we see as a typical thing in many other districts. So they were certainly doing some things to keep folks then. And you'll see in the slides that I send you, all of the districts will be listed. We have 20 districts in each of our zones, and this will show you the number of members and the net change, and where we see some really positive green things happening, and where we see a little bit of red and then some orange and yellow in terms of the numbers that are lost overall, to come to that 509 loss that we had in zone 28. And Rotaract will also share this information with you as well, just seeing the number of clubs and the number of members and the net change overall, which was very positive in both zones. and a list of the new Rotary clubs that formed. And you'll see all of the districts that were involved in making these happen. And some of them are sort of cause based, if you like, or specific interest based. There's a global online one. There's one that's looking at specifically an evening club. There's an e-club and so on within those new Rotary clubs that started. New satellites, we'll see different focuses for those as well. So 3 different ones were chartered in the last year. And the 10 new Rotaract clubs, which we're pretty excited about, that are all across much of the district. We see some action from the Université de Montréal all the way to community-based in London, Ontario. We see one focused on peace and education. Some of them have those specific cause-based things. Others are more, well, the names at least give us the indication of their geography, but they don't tell us if they are cause-based. Now 32, similar looking graph, similar trend, and you'll see the green line of what was needed in order to make that 0.5%. You'll see the blue line of what actually happened and the 3-year average, a little bit below the 3-year average. And so we've got some work to do this year to see if we can move those lines around. And the same data are available to you and will be shared in terms of each district, 20 districts in that zone as well. And you'll see the red and the green and the blue, or the orange and the yellow, to see where we're getting some really positive results, and see some districts that have made some good shifts. Even though the color might not all be green, there are certainly some that are making some great progress, and we're delighted to see that and available to help anywhere we can. Rotaract clubs, again, some really positive information there around the net change in the number of Rotaractors that we saw over the year, and 5 new clubs in different places. One district had 2, but we'll see those different cause-based one there with an international service impacting women and children, all the way through to others that are more geographic in their name, but I'm sure they may have some causes as well. The new satellite one of those focused on wellness and education from 4 different districts. And again, the Rotaract clubs, lots of those, community and university based. So really pleased to see that one in Bermuda. It was exciting to see that one come along. I also wanted to point out that, of course, these data are available to everyone. You can access data that you can interpret in different ways and compile in different ways through the membership action plan section, which is available on both Club Runner and DACDB. And if you need help with that, if you don't know how to access those data, let us know. We have people in both zones who are gurus in this, right up to the people in zone 33 and elsewhere who were instrumental in putting this all together and did the work behind the scenes and figured out the algorithms. We can connect you with whoever you need if you want to have a better understanding of your data. So now what are you going to do with all of this? Remember right back at the beginning, I said this is something that requires intentional action. And so the hope here is that your team will be prompted or inspired to think about intentional action. And what are the kinds of things you can do? Well, you could start with just looking at your online presence of how you present yourself to the world. And we have within our zones some public image experts and people that can help you with that. But it doesn't help anybody if people that are interested in your club or district go to your online presence and see the last post was in 2021 or is just totally out of date or not interesting. You can review the data for your district and your clubs and get help from us as needed. You'll see that's there a few times. Request help from zone experts. Surveying members, not just an exit survey, but surveys that really give you the information you need to make some changes. And we have a number of tools that are available through RI and lots of folks that can help you with those. Visioning exercises, those are things that we see districts that are facing some decline in numbers often do, but everybody should be doing this. And there are folks available to help you with that too, if you need to think about what kind of intentional action you will take. And then of course it's all about me thing, make member experience a priority. And that's something you just have to do that. You can't just think about it and say, oh, we really need a better member experience. You've got to have a plan and make sure that happens. So I'm a bit of a flamingo fan. If you remember, the flamingos have changed, and Barry Rassin talked about those. And this is one of my favorite ending slides, that we've got to be flamingos. We've got to be prepared to make a change. And even if we don't feel like a flamingo, we got to pretend we're a flamingo and have the courage to do some things differently. So that's really what tonight is meant to be, is to give you some of that background, to hopefully give you some ideas of things that you might do differently.